Did you know that nearly 80% of Africa's food is imported? Yes, you heard that right. Despite fertile land, rich rivers, and vast farming potential, Africa still relies on foreign countries to feed its people. And this isn't just an economic problem. It's a question of survival. When global trade routes are blocked, when the price of wheat in Europe or the war in Ukraine drives up grain costs, Africa suffers. Millions of families face hunger because the continent cannot control its own food supply. But in the heart of West Africa, one leader has declared, enough is enough. President Ibrahim Traore of Burkina Faso has announced a bold billion-dollar project to end his nation's dependency on foreign food. The cost? $981 million. The timeline? Just 3 years. The goal? Nothing less than food sovereignty. Some call it impossible. Others call it visionary. Traoré calls it survival. Today, we're going to unpack this massive plan. We'll explore how it works, what's already changing, and why it might be the most important revolution Africa has seen in decades. And let me tell you, by the end of this video, you'll see why this plan has global powers nervous. To understand why this project matters, let's step back. Why does Africa, the continent with some of the richest farmland in the world, import so much food? The answer goes back to history. During the colonial era, European powers reshaped African agriculture. Instead of producing food for local people, land was turned into cash crop plantations: cocoa in Ghana, coffee in Ethiopia, cotton in Burkina Faso, peanuts in Senegal. These crops were exported to Europe, and Africans had to buy imported rice, wheat, and processed foods to survive. After independence in the 1960s, many African governments tried to rebuild local farming. But then came the IMF and World Bank loans of the 1980s and 1990s. These institutions told African leaders, cut subsidies for farmers. Privatize agriculture, focus on exports. The result? Domestic food production collapsed. Farmers couldn't compete with cheap imported grain. And soon, Africa was spending billions every year on food imports. Today, that bill is estimated at $50 billion annually. Imagine what Africa could do with that money if it stayed on the continent. This is the problem Ibrahim Traore wants to solve. He's not just talking about farming. He's talking about reversing 60 years of dependency. Traoré's program is officially called the 2023-2025 Fishing and Agropastoral Offensive. Notice the word, offensive. It's not just a development project. It's a military-style campaign, a declaration of war, not against people but against hunger, poverty, and dependency. The budget, $981 million. Now, let's break it down. 54% of the funding, about $530 million, comes from the private sector. The rest comes from the state. This mix is critical.
It means Traoré is pulling in businesses and investors while also showing government commitment.
It's not one-sided. It's collective. The plan focuses on 8 key sectors: rice, corn, potatoes, wheat, fish, meat, poultry, mango. Why these 8? Because they cover both basic staples, like rice and corn, and income generators like mangoes and poultry. It's about feeding people and creating export potential. Imagine a Burkina Faso that not only feeds itself but sells food to its neighbors. That's the vision. Traoré himself said, "A people that cannot feed itself is not independent." This project is his proof. So how is this plan being rolled out? First, jobs. More than 100,000 new jobs are being created. But here's the detail that matters. These jobs are targeted at youth, women, and displaced persons. Why? Because these are the groups most vulnerable in Burkina Faso. By empowering them, the plan not only feeds people but stabilizes society. Second, equipment. Already, the government has distributed $135 million worth of farming tools. Thousands of tractors, irrigation pumps for dry zones, pesticides and fertilizers. Think about that. For decades, African farmers were expected to compete with Western agriculture, but without modern tools. Now they finally have machines to boost production. Third, fish farming innovation. Floating fish cages are being installed on rivers and lakes. Together, they're expected to produce 300 tons of fish annually. That's fresh protein for thousands of families produced locally. Fourth, storage facilities. 9 new warehouses have been built, with a total capacity of 5,500 tons. This might sound simple, but it's revolutionary. Across Africa, Nearly 40% of harvests are lost because farmers have no way to store crops. Food rots before it ever reaches the market. With warehouses, Burkina Faso can stabilize prices, reduce waste, and build reserves. And here's something powerful. Local farmers say they finally feel respected. One farmer told reporters, "For the first time, the state is treating us like partners, not beggars." That psychological shift, from dependency to dignity, is as important as the tractors and fish farms. Now, let's look at the bigger picture. What does this plan mean for Burkina Faso and for Africa as a whole? First, food as national security. For Traoré, food is more important than weapons. Why? Because an army marches on its stomach, and a nation that cannot feed its people is a nation vulnerable to foreign pressure. Second, the military-style mobilization. This isn't a slow bureaucratic program. It's run with deadlines, targets, and urgency. Even the military itself is helping transport equipment and secure farmland. Third, the import reduction target. The plan aims to cut food imports by 80% by 2025. Think about that. If Burkina Faso currently imports 80% of its food, this plan flips the equation completely in just 3 years. Fourth, the continental impact. If this plan succeeds, other African countries will notice. Ghana, Nigeria, Mali, Senegal all face the same dependency problem. Burkina Faso could become a blueprint for Pan-African food independence. And here's the big question. What happens if 10 African countries launch billion-dollar food offensives at the same time? Western powers who profit from selling grain to Africa would lose billions. More importantly, Africa would finally control its own destiny. So what's at stake here? This isn't just about Burkina Faso, it's about Africa's future. If Traoré succeeds, it proves that Africa doesn't need to depend on the West for aid or imports. It proves that sovereignty begins not in parliament or on the battlefield, but in the soil and on the farm. But let's be honest, the road won't be easy. There will be challenges, climate shocks, resistance from entrenched elites, and possibly even external sabotage. Because make no mistake, some global players do not want Africa to be independent. Still, Traoré's message is clear. If we can feed ourselves, we can free ourselves. Pause. And that brings us to you. Do you believe this is Africa's most important revolution? Could food sovereignty be the real key to African independence? Drop a in the comments if you believe Africa must feed itself. And don't forget to subscribe, because we're going to follow every milestone of this $981 million food offensive. Because this isn't just Burkina Faso's story. It's Africa's story, and it might just be the future of the world.